Sudanese protesters may have ended the reign of Omar al-Bashir, but will the military run roughshod over their hopes for a civilian government? I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is the future of Sudan's revolution. Sudan's uprising was caused by the high cost of bread. Now it's morphed into a demand for democracy. Thousands of activists are staging a sit-in in front of the army's headquarters in the capital, Khartoum, and they have a lot to worry about. The military has stacked a transitional council with its own officers and then dismissed a draft constitution written by civilian opposition leaders. Instead, the army wrote its own. One protester expressed exasperation, saying the army doesn't realize its job is not to assume power, but to hand it over. The sentiment that is echoed by the African Union and the United Nations as well, which have both called military rule unacceptable. But is that support enough? Because Omar al-Bashir might be under house arrest, but there's still a big question mark about the future of Sudan's revolution. Well, let's jump straight into our debate with our guests. Joining me now from Khartoum is Rabi Abdul-Ati Obaid. He was a senior official with Sudan's National Congress Party, which was ousted in the protests. Khalid Omar Yusuf is the Secretary General of the Sudanese opposition Sudanese Congress Party. And Hamid Murtada is a protester who was jailed last month. Gentlemen, good to have you on the program. Khalid Omar Yusuf, let me start with you. Do you trust this transitional military council?
Actually, the transitional council did all the wrong things during the last weeks. We offer the army a partnership for transition. We said that the future of Sudan can be built by the cooperation of the civil society, the political parties, the professionals, and the army. And this shared project will meet the aspiration of the Sudanese people. But since then, unfortunately, this military council started to go the way for replacing a dictator by another dictator. And that's why the sit-in, all kinds of resistance is still taking place all around the country, because the demand of people is very clear. The transition for a democracy, peace, justice through civilian authorities that represented the powers and the aspiration of the revolutionary people all around Sudan.
Okay, so Hamid, is this what they call the deep state? Are we seeing the deep state trying to make sure that they don't lose the levers of power?
Indeed, it is the deep state trying to keep the power, and the military is to some very high extent part of the previous regime, and many of the officials now in the military council were engaged in a lot of the crimes committed by the previous regime. So indeed it's the interest to keep the previous regime for as long as they can, and that's why they cannot be trusted. And as Mr. Khalid just said, they have been doing all the wrong things and not being honest in the promises that they made that they will transfer power to civilians. And it has been a month of the sit-in in front of the army headquarters, and they haven't delivered their promises.
Rabi Abdul-Ati, I guess from the outside, looking at your position and looking at the fact that your government lost power in a revolution, I would presume that you're not very happy with the way things are going.
Yes, actually, I am not now speaking on behalf of National Congress Party, as National Congress Party now has no existence in the political scene. And according to the statement and the declaration of the Transitional Military Council, that National Congress Party will have no role and they will have no function in this interim period. Now, I am speaking as an analyst only, political analyst, and also speaking as a media specialist. I think that, and I hope that this transitional military council will reach to an agreement with this group of freedom and change and with all political functions, so that we will reach to stability and also to prepare properly for the election which will be carried out after 2 years according to the view of the Transitional Military Council.
Rabi, I'm looking forward to getting your answer to this question. A lot of the protesters believed that for too long, for many decades, Omar al-Bashir kept all the power to himself, and his inner circle, his cronies, of which you would be considered a part. You were corrupt, you were dictatorial, you were undemocratic. Is that accurate?
Yes, actually, for me as a person and as a member in National Congress Party before, even in the year 2015, I didn't cast my vote for Umar al-Bashir, and I was against Umar al-Bashir to be as a president of Sudan for more than 30 years. And this is actually my view and my opinion already published in the local newspapers. But actually, we were struggling. I believe that, and I agree with you that Umar al-Bashir was ruling the country for more than 30 years, and this is not legal and not something which will be acceptable by the Sudanese people.
What sort of advice would you give to someone like Khalid? What should Khalid and his party do?
Yes, I think that we hope that because now we are in a vacuum, constitutional vacuum, and I don't think that this vacuum will be good for the stability in our country. I hope that all the political factions and all political parties, including this Sudanese Congress Party, they should sit together and to have one accord so that we can form a government from technocrats and to prepare and to arrange for the interim period properly so that the election will be a transparent election, and after that a civilian government will come, and this actually will represent the democratic transformation which we require.
Okay, so Khalid, we have Rabi Abdel-Ati, who knows the system because he was within the system for a long time, suggesting that the opposition needs to be more unified here. It would be in your best interests. Would you agree with that?
The unity defeat the former regime. The unity of the opposition on the streets since the signature of Declaration of Freedom and Change succeed to face the brutality of Bashir regime. And the unity is the key for the future. We know that very much, and we know as well that to unite the people of Sudan, this will be, you have to keep the balance between the unity and diversity. Sudan is a very diverse country. Every voice should be heard. Every opinion should be taken into consideration. And we should not exclude anyone that part of the change process, because the revolution is not only belong to the political parties or the professionals. There are youth, women, and there are people who are participating in a courageous way to get rid of the former regime. So, of course, for the future, we have to keep the unity. We have to develop this unity in a way to make anyone in Sudan find himself in political bodies that really representing them.
Okay, so Hamid, given that we've seen the military, the Transitional Council, play their hand a little bit over the past couple of weeks, how much do you fear that we're going to see a Sudanese Sisi emerge and a similar situation to Egypt of a few years ago?
Indeed, this is what we have been seeing for the past few weeks, and the name matching of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Abdel Fattah Burhan is not a coincidence, I guess. So yes, this is pretty much a possible scenario, and this is why we are still at the sit-in, and this is why we are still determined to be out there, to take it up further, to escalate to the highest levels, because this is the scenario that we do not want to happen. But we do think that it's a very possible scenario, and the regime is trying to reproduce itself by having this military phase, and which would be could be a very similar scenario to the Egyptian scenario, although the circumstances in Sudan are quite different. But yeah, the reason why we are still out there in the streets and still determined to keep the sitting going is that we do not want any reproduction or recycling of the previous corrupt regime.
Rabi Abdel-Ati, this previous corrupt regime that you worked for, is it easy to dismantle, or is it still lurking about in the system?
Yes, actually, when we want to say that to dismantle a political party, this is actually, it is not possible to dismantle a political party because we have already lived a trial since the revolution in 1964, when the regime at that time tried to dismantle the Communist Party. The Communist Party came again, and whenever also we tried to, in the year 1986, also to dismantle some political parties, also again a coup happened. We want to learn from our actually lessons. That lesson in 1964 during October Revolution, and also the lesson in the year 1985. But we don't want to repeat ourselves and to actually to be far away from that that experiment and that trial in the two decades, two times. We don't want to govern our country by a coup and by a civil, and we want to leave this actually wicked circle, wicked cycle. And I think that all political parties should learn from the political history of our country.
Khalid, learn from the political history. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and dismantle everything. Do you agree with that?
First one who should learn from the history is Rabi and his people. They destroyed the country. They had a very evil ideology and ideas that's really divide the people of Sudan, that in the name of Islam, they had genocide in Sudan. They divide the country for two countries. They destroy the productive sector in Sudan, and now the mission to build the future is very difficult. So learning from the history mean that not repeat the history, mean that to be honest about who was the criminal, who harmed this country, and who should be accountable for all this destruction. We have no intention to repeat the mistakes of the past. Our project, our aspiration for Sudan, our dream for Sudan is a Sudan that's really inclusive, that Sudan that for all its people. Mm-hmm. So to have an inclusive Sudan, we have to stand very strongly against any kind of exclusive ideology or ideas, and the Islamists in Sudan were the source of the most criminal ideology that destroyed the country in Sudan.
Rabi, very strong words from Khalid there.
I don't want to defend, actually, to say that this is criminal, and to say, because I am not a judge. I think that if there is any responsible or any minister or any member in the National Congress Party who has any corruption, this is actually should be a subject for law and for, because we have a judicial system which is actually a system to settle such problems, who is corrupt and who is not corrupt. We are speaking now about the corruption. We want to remove corruption, whether this corruption is from any political party, whether communists or whether even the Sudanese Congress political party or any other citizen who committed a mistake or committed any corruption in our country. Because I don't want to make myself as a judge to see to say this is this man is corrupted and this
but
man
worth
is not
noting
corrupted,
that
because I think that there is nothing called impunity.
Okay.
There is no,
but worth noting that one man and one party, certainly one man and one party, ran the country for 30 years, though. So it's difficult to say, well, everybody did it. Hamid, final word to you. Final word to you. We're running out of time. Briefly, please wrap us up, Hamid Murtada.
So yeah, the city is continuing, and the Sudan's uprising is continuing. We are ready to take it to all the highest level. We are getting prepared for civil disobedience. all what we want is for the military council to hand power to a civilian government with a civilian council with a limited representation of military officials that would govern the country through the 4 years transitional period, and then we can have an election and finally have the country of our dreams that we have been dreaming of for the past 30 years.
Gentlemen, it's been a very important conversation to have. I thank you very much for joining us. Rabi, Khalid and Hamid, thanks again for joining us. Coming up on the program, after dozens of deaths, Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire. But could more violence be on the way? And we look at how Libya's allies are influencing the battlegrounds of the Libyan war. The Gaza Strip and southern Israel are quiet for now. A ceasefire has ended the violence that killed dozens of Palestinians and 4 Israelis over the weekend. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the campaign isn't over. He didn't specify what that means exactly, but his right-wing government is facing criticism from people living in Israeli border towns who say any truce with Palestinian armed groups amounts to capitulation. So, could the fighting resume? Natalie Perhernan reports.
This was the most intense fighting between Israelis and Palestinians since the 2014 war. Over 3 days, more than 600 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip. Israel responded with hundreds of airstrikes. The surge in violence claimed lives on both sides of the border. 25 Palestinians, including children and women, were killed. 4 Israelis also died. But in the early hours of Monday morning, a ceasefire came into effect between Israel on one side and Hamas and its ally Islamic Jihad on the other. Hamas says it's ready to respond to any aggression. The Israeli government hasn't formally acknowledged the truce, but it has called this period a return to quiet, and it's holding for now.
אנחנו שינינו את כללי המשחק, והחמאס מבין זאת היטב. ועם זאת, ברור זה לא סוף המערכה, ולכן הנחיתי להיערך להמשך, והנחיתי גם להשאיר את כוחות השריון והארטילריה סביב רצועת עזה.
The Israeli Prime Minister has come under political fire from within the government and the opposition for agreeing to the truce. And there are ordinary Israelis who back them.
We are too nice to Hamas. We need to thoroughly clean up Gaza with a firm hand and without mercy, so this situation will be over once and for all.
This round of fighting is over. Quiet has returned to the streets, but there are real concerns about how long it will last.
This truce will be the same as the previous ones. Each time there's a truce for a week or two, and then they're back to fighting again. This is how it's been throughout the history of the Palestinian people.
In this environment, it seems holding on to the hope of peace is just another battle. Natalie Perhernan, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from West Jerusalem by retired Brigadier General Yossi Cooper-Vasa. He's the former head of the research division in the Israeli military and the former Director General of the Israel Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Sir, good to have you on the Newsmakers. So, now that the ceasefire is holding for now, in the aftermath, 4 Israelis dead from the rockets that came from Gaza and 25 Palestinians, as far as we understand, from the Israeli airstrikes. Was it worth it?
This is not a question of whether it was worth it. Of course, it wasn't worth it. Nobody in Israel at least likes to go into this round. We never initiate it. It's forced upon us. So it's not a question of whether it was worth it. We would rather not have it. Did we come up with making some progress towards achieving our goal? Yes, but the price for us and for the Palestinians is heavy. And it's a pity that people have to pay this price basically for nothing, because nothing is going to change. Nothing substantial is going to change in this kind of relationship we have with the Gaza Strip under Hamas. That's not going to change anytime soon. Maybe in the longer time, in the longer future, maybe, but right now it's very difficult to see something changing, and this is just a pity to see all this suffering.
A lot of the time, many analysts say this sort of operation by the Israelis is termed cutting the grass. Would you consider this one of those? And tell us what that means.
Well, you know, what we in Israel were trying to achieve is to restore some sort of calm that we have with the Palestinians in Gaza, and to make sure that this calm is going to last as long as possible. That's what we want. And for that to happen, we have to clarify to the Palestinians that the price they are going to pay for initiating such kinds of atrocities is heavy, and it's not in their interest to launch such initiatives. I think they paid a heavy price. 25 people that you mentioned, most of them were activists or terrorists from the terror groups that operate from Gaza, both Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. They lost a lot of their infrastructure. They lost a lot of their ammunition. They lost a lot of their warehouses and workshops for producing arms. They lost the tunnel that they were preparing for a long time with a lot of money. And most of all, I think they lost the credibility in front of their own constituency, because as I saw people saying, how many meals to break the fast of Ramadan could have been paid by the money spent on these tunnels and on these rockets that we launched at Israel without gaining anything considerable for us. And this is the price they paid, and this is why they asked for a ceasefire as soon as possible. And we made it a point to not immediately accept the ceasefire, but just to make sure that they really get the message that it's against their interest to launch this kind of atrocities. I hope they will remember it for a long time, and we shall enjoy stability. And we have nothing against the Palestinians in Gaza enjoying better life, as long as this is not on the expense of our security. And so we are trying to promote a situation where they enjoy life and they don't have to pay a price, and neither do we.
There was an op-ed written in Haaretz by retired General Shlomo Gazet, who was the head of military intelligence within Israel. He said, lift the siege on Gaza. His words, not mine, quoting, Gaza is the largest prison camp in history. So he's saying the root causes are, this place has been besieged for 12 years. You're undoubtedly going to have everything else being a symptom of that. Lift the siege and things will get better. That's the root cause. Then you have quiet. Why wouldn't you agree with him?
Well, I think he's, he left the military ages ago, and I don't think he really understands the situation. The situation that the Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad don't want just to rule Gaza in order to be able to govern the people in Gaza and to make sure that they enjoy the best living conditions. This is not the purpose for which Hamas and Islamic Jihad want to rule Gaza. Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas want to rule Gaza because they want to turn Gaza into a base from which they can promote their interest, and the main interest is to annihilate Israel as nation state of the Jewish people. That's their purpose. That's why they're building all these capabilities, all these military capabilities there with the assistance of Iran and some other elements.
Yossi Kuperwasser, good to get some insight into some of the strategic military thinking taking place right now within Israel with regards to Gaza. Good to talk to you. Hope to have you back on the program sometime soon. Let's open up the discussion to debate and bring in our panel. I'm joined now by Ran Bar Yoshafat, the Deputy Director of the Coaled Policy Forum and a former candidate for the New Right Party of Israel. In London is lecturer Azam Tamimi. He's a presenter of Al Hiwar TV channel and the author of the book Hamas, Unwritten Chapters. And in Washington, D.C. is Dave Harden. He's the Managing Director of the Georgetown Strategy Group and spearheaded USAID efforts in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Azam Tamimi, you heard from Yossi Kuperwasser. He's trying to give us some insight into the thinking there as to why the Israelis would have done this sort of thing and why, okay, it's okay for a ceasefire right now. What do you think?
Well, this has been going on in cycles simply because the siege has been maintained on Gaza. And despite previous agreements, despite a recent agreement reached through Egyptian brokerage, the Israelis have not complied with what was agreed upon. The people of Gaza are collectively being punished and pushed into a corner. And this is because the Israelis use Gaza for their own political ends, especially Netanyahu, where Israel is becoming increasingly right-wing, increasingly racist, xenophobic as well. And the people of Gaza are being punished for all of this.
Ranbar Yoshafat, are you happy that there's a ceasefire, that the killing has stopped?
I'm not happy with the ceasefire because usually in a ceasefire we cease and Hamas fires. And I think that we will have another conflict soon because there are people who want to murder Jews and some Jews who just don't like to be murdered. And apparently that causes a conflict in our area. I just find it a bit strange to call all of this event as something as if Israel is the aggressor. It began because Hamas fired over 700 rockets into Israel. I also really don't agree with the fact that there's a siege over Gaza. Gaza has a border with Egypt. Maybe Egypt also understands that there's a problem when all the people in Gaza are being controlled by a theocratical terrorist organization called Hamas, that in their charter they say murder Jews wherever they are. This is why we have violence. When Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, there was no siege. People assumed that 50,000 people from Gaza will enter Israel on a daily basis with no checking. But then Hamas took over, killed hundreds of people from the Palestinian Authority, and created basically a Hamastan, a terrorist state or entity on Gaza.
Okay, I'm going to get a response from Azam Tamimi in a second, but let me bring in Dave Harden to ask about the American angle here, because you worked within the system, within the US administration, right? From the Trump administration, Israel is clearly the victim here. Hamas is the aggressor. I wonder if you think that if there's anything that the Trump administration can do right now that can be of value to bringing about positive change here.
So I'm pretty doubtful that the Trump administration can or will do anything that would be useful in deconflicting the crisis. I want to point out that I think, you know, your guests kind of illustrate the point that the Palestinians and the Israelis are destined to live together. Nobody's moving away. And so therefore, in that context, what do you do? And this is where the Americans can actually come in and help kind of guide and shape some policies that would provide for a better outcome and a better future for both people. And I will tell you, in 2005, during Gaza disengagement, there was also the questions about what to do in the northern West Bank within Jenin. And in Jenin, we opened up trade and massive economic opportunity. And in Gaza, economic pressure was intended to yield political change with Hamas. Gaza failed. There are no counterbalances in Gaza right now. And, you know, Jenin has been a good example of what's possible in many ways, not completely, but in many ways. And so I think the Trump administration is frankly absent, and they don't have the credibility, the authority, the relationships to help shape and kind of foster a better outcome.
Okay, so Azam Tamimi, we heard from Ranbar Yoshafat giving, you know, a very pro-right-wing, pro-continuing to pound Hamas for as long as possible in Gaza, for as long as it takes perspective. We heard Dave Harden hanging a question mark over what the Trump administration can do right now. With that in mind, what does Hamas do in Gaza?
What does it do in Gaza? Hamas is running.
What does it do now? What does it do?
Population under siege.
What would Sinwar do? What would Hania do? What would they be thinking right now?
I really don't know. You need to bring one of them and ask them that question.
What should they do?
Well, they should insist on lifting the siege. And anybody who claims that there is no siege on Gaza is simply lying. It's just like denying that the sun doesn't exist. Everybody knows. Ask international observers, ask the Americans, the people in the West, the people in the East, ask anybody, and they will tell you that for the past 12 years, the people of Gaza are being punished. Why is Israel denying fishermen, for instance, the freedom to fish? Even zones which were agreed upon in previous ceasefires were always violated by the Israelis. The Israelis want to push the Gazans further and further to the corner in the hope that they would probably rise against Hamas and topple the current regime. This is not happening because people know that their suffering is not because of Hamas. They are suffering because of Israel and its collaboration with some Arabs, including the Egyptians.
Okay, so Ranbar Yoshafat, given that the siege has been in effect for more than a decade, yet, as you mentioned, the rockets still keep on coming, doesn't that suggest that the siege is not working?
Well, again, this is not a chicken and the egg story, and I think that if you learn a little bit of geography, you can see that Gaza has a border with Egypt. So to put the blame on Israel, it's kind of interesting. There was no quote-unquote siege. What happened was, again, that Hamas took over, began firing rockets at Israel, and then Israel said, well, if that's the case, we're not going to allow 50,000 people from Gaza into Israel on a daily basis. Furthermore, regarding the areas where Arabs in Gaza can fish and cannot use their fishing territory, that was because of many ships coming from Iranian money into Gaza. These ships had ammunitions, rockets, different guns were aimed at Israel, which is why Israel said, well, if that's how you're going to act with your access to water, we're going to make sure that after a certain area into the Mediterranean Sea, you will not be able to transfer large ships. The main issue here is what will be in the future. Now, I'm saying this not because I'm happy, I'm very sad about it, but I think eventually Israel will just have to take Gaza back into Israel's sovereignty, because obviously the Arabs in Gaza are unable to control themselves in a way that really reflects anything with human rights. I think actually the Arabs in Gaza would be way better off under Israeli martial law, because right now what we have is that when people are protesting against Hamas in the streets, Hamas are shooting them, murdering them. Anyone who is even accused of being with some sort of correlation to Israel, they murder them. And I think, unfortunately, there's not going to be another alternative where Israel will not be able to accept all of these accusations against Israel as if Israel is the aggressor, when you have innocent Israelis, 500,000 in the beginning, and then 1.5 million Israelis under fire. Israel government will just not accept it. Doesn't matter if it's right-wing or left-wing government.
But Ranbar Yoshafat, in order to redo an occupation of the Gaza Strip with soldiers on the ground, that might involve a really big war, that might involve killing tens of thousands of people. Would that be worth it for you?
I don't think it's a matter of worth it, and I just want to say it's not to occupy, it's to free Gaza from Hamas. I really hope that would not be the case. If
free it
for
under
us not
martial
to
law.
have it, you have to take down Hamas.
Just like the West Bank is.
I would argue
just
that,
like the West Bank is free.
I would argue that for the.
Right now.
I'm going to argue, well, first of all, Judean Samaria has the Palestinian Authority. But I'm going to argue that under martial law, Arabs will have more human rights than under Hamas. But that's not the point. The point is not if I want to do it, it's the fact that I'm going to be forced to do it. Now, regarding the American administration, I have to say, as an Israeli, I appreciate all American administrations, even if it's from the Republican Party or Democratic Party. This current administration, I think I'm speaking on behalf of many Israelis, we really enjoy this administration. But in the end of the day, this is not a question for Americans. This is a question for Israelis and the Arabs in Gaza and the Arabs in Judea and Samaria. We will have to solve it ourselves.
Azam Tamimi, the suggestion that the Israelis feel that they might need to roll in the tanks again and actually physically occupy Gaza again. Tell me what that would mean.
Well, let's see them do it. Let's see them do it and see what happens.
Okay, what will happen?
Well, if your guest on the other side is threatening with military invasion, let's have an invasion and see what goes on.
Okay. Dave Harden, as we got this ceasefire announced, we had the Qataris pledging almost $500 million in aid to Gaza. So the Egyptians and the Qataris got together. We don't know exactly what was happening behind closed doors, but there's a ceasefire and it's holding for now, thankfully. Nobody's dying at this moment in time, right? You mentioned Janine earlier on in terms of economic development, right? Throughout this discussion, we've spoken about the economic deprivation in the Gaza Strip. Is that Qatari money going to make much of a difference and help prevent another flare-up?
No, it won't. And I want to make a few other points. In some regards, both of your other guests are, have elements of truth in what it is that they're saying. And the other thing that's striking is that both the Israelis and the Palestinians are smart people. Given the talent that we have here, even on this debate, you would think that we would be able to come up with some better solutions than martial law. I mean, the Israelis could do that they could decide to do that tomorrow. The consequences and the cost for the Israelis to reoccupy on a street-by-street basis Gaza is something that the Netanyahu government and others have thought about and rejected for the last 15 years. That's not in the cards. But it's also the case that the Palestinians need a better future. Hamas has not delivered that. They were elected in. There's no chance. There's absolute hopelessness on the streets in Gaza. There are no jobs. There's no opportunity. There's no vision. There's no future. There's nothing. And so with that in mind, I mean, we can't possibly come up with a better solution. Because what we're doing right now, this ceasefire, we're going to buy a few days, weeks, months. There's nothing between the fishermen can't fish and we open up the waterways so that Iran brings in ballistic missiles. There's nothing in between. I'm sure that we can come up with something in between.
Okay, well, it's a depressing situation for the moment. Thankfully, the ceasefire is holding, but a lot of people expect there to be another flare-up, and some expect a very big one sometime soon. We hope that is not the case. Gentlemen, I have to move on, but let me thank you for the moment. Dave Harden, Azam Tamimi, and Ranbar Yoshafat. Good to have you on the Newsmakers.
There will be no progress without a solid Franco-Italian agreement. We have to work quickly, because the ingredients for a deterioration are all there.
It seemed an awkward reality of the war in Libya. EU member states allegedly backing opposing sides, with the perception Italy and France were in effect fighting each other on the other side of the Mediterranean. But now, in an effort to clear up confusion and concern, France has publicly backtracked from its support of Libya's rebel commander Khalifa Haftar. The Libyan government, backed by the UN and Italy, had criticized France for its perceived support of a rival force at a time when Haftar's self-styled Libyan National Army is trying to seize the capital, Tripoli. Paris says any praise it has for Haftar is limited to his efforts in fighting terrorism. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined here in the studio by Jumal Gamati. He's the head of Libya's Tahrir Party and a member of the UN-backed political dialogue group. And Mohammed Al-Jarrah is next to him, the founder and CEO of the research and consultancy firm Libya Outlook. And in Paris, we have former diplomat Anne Guidicelli. She's the CEO of the consulting firm Terror Risk. Okay, good to have all of you on the program. Jumal Gamati, let me start with you. It seems as if nothing can stop Haftar. Even calls for a Ramadan ceasefire have only seemed to galvanize him. He's telling his fighters, no, use Ramadan to go and fight harder.
Well, I think if one thing that's going to stop Haftar, and it's already stopping him, is the people of Libya, the people of Tripoli, the people who are fighting against him, who stood up to him and prevented him from penetrating into the capital and taking it over by force and causing a catastrophe in terms of human disasters. And also taking the capital means taking power and means taking us back to the dark days of dictatorship and despotism. So I think after 35 days, he has failed. He's now being pushed back. He's now pushed back further and further away from the capital. The capital has been secured, and I believe it's only a matter of time before he's totally pushed back and defeated, and then he will hopefully go back to where he came from, and that will end his military campaigns and military ambitions, and with it, his political ambitions as well, because post-2011 revolution, we will never go back to one-man totalitarian rule ever again, and not go back to tyranny at all.
Right. Mohammed, is it an indication that he doesn't have the support that he thinks he has, given that we've gone through all this trouble, more than 400 people killed, 50,000 displaced, thousands injured, yet the defenses are still holding and the fighting continues? Does it tell us that Haftar is not the Gaddafi-esque leader that he thinks he is, and the people are pushing back against him?
It's important to remember that there has been a stalemate in Tripoli for more than 30 days now. For any side to claim that they can actually decisively win this war as it stands now, I think is a little bit far-fetched. I think all parties involved in the war, regional and also international parties, should now be seriously thinking about a ceasefire on humanitarian ground, for example, to give a little bit of time for negotiations, for a political dialogue to be restarted, and also use this crisis, if you like, as an opportunity.
Haftar attacked at a time of political dialogue, so why should the other side trust him?
Haftar attacked for a number of reasons. One of them has been that if he is part of a political solution and the capital Tripoli, where he does not have any forces loyal to him, why would he go there? Who's going to protect him if he is going to there as the head of the army? That, and there was the Abu Dhabi agreement, where there were supposed to be an arrangement by which Haftar would be able to actually have places or positions around or within Tripoli, so that he could become then part of a political solution. Basically, Haftar does not trust the armed groups that are in Tripoli, and he wants to have military presence in the capital in order to make sure that he is able to secure his seat of power, if he like. He is part of a political solution.
Juma, I'm going to get your response in a second, but I want to bring Anne in, because Anne, I want to ask you if the Europeans have made it worse by initially, at least from the perspective of the French, initially supporting Haftar quite openly. Have they made it worse?
Well, you know, Europe is not the only one player in that ground, in that crisis. You have many other foreign, let's say, interferences in that crisis that some of them are backing Trablus, and the other one are backing Benghazi. So it's quite complicated now, the situation, and Europe is one of them. And as you know, Europe is not the whole European Union. You have also two European countries that are more influential in that crisis. Of course, you have Italy, where Mr. Sarraj is actually nowadays. And also you have France, where Mr. Sarraj also will come to visit President Macron tomorrow. So I mean, you have also Germany, which has a big importance within the European Union, but not as a European state as Italy and France have.
Right. Juma, what's interesting is it seems as if the outsiders are waiting for somebody to win. They just want somebody to win so they can then look at oil deals, reconstruction deals, stabilizing the situation, caring about migration, caring about terrorism. How do you feel about that? That whether it's Haftar or whether it's the government that you support, they just want somebody to win.
Well, that is the reality. That's international politics. That's pragmatism. Countries, even the major countries like America, France, and Russia, are only looking for their interest. And whoever can win in Libya, whoever can control Libya, whoever can stabilize Libya, they will do business with. Now, the thing is, we have a government of national accord, which is recognized by the whole world. It's the only legitimate legal government in place. And we have this rogue general who, just because he wants to operate as a general commander of the army from Tripoli, he has to take it over by force, shell it indiscriminately every night, and shell it with Grad missiles, and kill as many people as possible, even to go to the extent of destroying half of the capital. That's a ridiculous, ludicrous argument. This man never believed in any peace, never believed in any deal. He does not want to be partner in any setup. He only wants to be at the top of the pyramid. But he wants to be number one, like Gaddafi days.
Okay, but we talk about geopolitics. Certainly, he wants these things. We talk about geopolitics, right? The reality, historically, right? Mao wasn't recognized until he took over, right? He was a rogue general, and so on. Isn't it, as we talk cynically about geopolitics, the fact that he has so much power, doesn't that worry you? You can have 50 governments recognize you, 100 governments recognize you. He's got more power than you on the ground right now.
Well, if he has so much power, he promised his followers that he will take over Tripoli in 3 days. And now, 35 days later, he's being pushed back even further. Where is that power? No, clearly, he's not winning. The war is not going his way. So, this is his final push. This is make or break. This is winner take all. If he does not take Tripoli, if he fails, he will be totally out. So he's not winning. He's not as strong as possible. He's using militias. He's using extremist Salafis. He's using Sudanese mercenaries. He's recruiting young
one
boys.
Of the arguments is
boys
that
as old as 15
he's keeping
and 16.
the militias in check. He's the guy keeping the extremist militias in check. That's why so many people support him.
But this war showed that who are the real militias and who are the disciplined, organized. Look at the way his people are treating prisoners. They torture prisoners. They kill them at cold blood. Whereas the GNA forces, they treat prisoners very humanely according to international law.
Mohammed, is this...
So he's just a leader of a bunch of militias. Just like the militias he's accusing of.
Is this just a warlord, a rogue warlord?
I don't think he is just that. I think he represents a project that many Libyans have subscribed to, and that's stability and security first. And it is also a project that is supported regionally.
No matter how many people he might kill along the way to get to that?
Any military campaign, unfortunately, will definitely result in huge casualties. And this is why I think it's wise that the war in Tripoli stops now, and that now the militias are in check, and now that there is a balance of power in Tripoli, that we truly can go to negotiations and to political solutions. And also the fact that 30 days and no party has actually been able to win this war decisively is an indication that this war could actually be prolonged. And also we see foreign interference. For example, we were talking about France, but targeting France alone is a little bit unfair. Why not talk about Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Turkey or Qatar and these countries that are supporting different sides in the war, for example? So it is not just a Libyan conflict in reality. It is definitely a regional one, and also there is an international element to this.
Let me ask Juma if you agree with Mohammed when he says that many Libyans subscribe to this project of stability no matter what.
Many Libyans prior to this war on Tripoli believed that Haftar could be a man who would stabilize Libya and give them security. After they saw the way he attacked Tripoli, indiscriminate air bombardment every night, Grad missiles on residential areas, killing of prisoners, now his support, his popular support, has almost evaporated. A year ago, if he went for elections as a president, he might gain 60%. Now he will not even gain 15%. I'm sorry, he totally lost it. Okay, and the other thing is to say that we agree to a ceasefire now is to equate the aggressor with those who have been defending their city and their capital. To agree to a ceasefire now is to hand Haftar a political victory. Haftar has to withdraw from all the parts he controls now and go back to his positions, status quo, prior to 3rd of April. And that's what the Sarraj said. That's what the government of National Court is saying. They will not deal with him. They will not negotiate with him. He will no longer be a partner in the political process.
Mean more.
Excuse me, let me just finish. He has to go back. Otherwise, the war will go on. And the people who are defending Tripoli and defending the cities in the west, which Haftar attacked from a distance of 1,000 kilometers, have every legitimate right to go on and defend their cities until he is defeated.
There are many inaccuracies in all of this. Haftar has Tarhuna, the city of Tarhuna, 80 kilometers from
occupied
Tripoli.
Tarhuna and Gharian.
These cities supported him. He
No,
actually entered
Gharian
without
does not
actually.
support him. He took it over by power. I come from Gharian.
He entered
you
without.
You can't tell me about my own city.
He entered without firing a single shot. He took the city over in a night, in a few hours. So there was support, and some of the armed groups there have actually flipped. So to try and make it that he came from 1,000 kilometers, and then he managed to actually be 25.
Okay, so he scooped up a lot of power and a lot of cities along the way. You disagree. You both disagree on how that happened.
It's also very important. The GNA has failed.
Okay, so with that, the GNA has failed, and with the UN-mediated process, Basan Salami and so on, do enough of the power brokers actually trust that the UN can actually mediate this process, or is the UN now an irrelevance at this point in time?
Well, I do believe that the UN is still and might be and might remain only the sole mediator in that. And what he has to do is just to to push for stopping the backing coming from all those foreign powers. I mean, not only those Western countries that your guest mentioned, but also, of course, the regional powers, like, as it has been mentioned as well, like Saudi and Emirat, and also, of course, Egypt and Turkey and Qatar and all those countries. I mean, they are having a very big role in what is going on now. So what can be done is a big pressure coming from, let's say, a neutral actor, who is Hassan Salameh, the UN envoy, to push and make a big gesture, have a big posture on that. That means that stopping all this interference, the time to cease, to finalize a ceasefire, and to open the way for a real peace negotiation without regional or international interferences.
Okay. Well, for the moment, the fighting continues. Haftar's LNA just shot down a government plane outside the capital, south of Tripoli. Yes.
Because nobody has got for the moment the power to push him to stop.
Right.
Anyway, as it has been said, I agree with your guest. I mean, he's going to fail, obviously military. But he wants to go. At the maximum he can go. For what? For having a piece of the cake at the end of the day. I mean, that's obviously clearly the meaning of that strategy.
Okay. Unfortunately, I've got to wrap and move on. But it's carnage in Tripoli for the moment, and we hope it settles down. Anne Guricelli, Mohammed Al-Jarrah, and Jamal Gamati, I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers.
Thank you.
That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Next time, thousands of Iraqis who lived under Daesh in Syria could be sent home, only to be held in a mass detention camp. Is it for their own safety, or do they themselves pose a security threat? Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.